Did September 11th change the United States? On the morning of September 11th, 2001, New York City was busy as usual. People went to work. Kids went to school. The sun was shining and no one knew what was coming. All the news channels were talking about what a beautiful day it was. At 8:46 a.m., everything changed, and there was the first sign of horror. A plane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Flames and thick smoke filled the sky. People on the streets stopped. In shock, they stared. Was it an accident? No one knew. Confusion turned to fear. Something was terribly wrong. But then, at 9:03 a.m., as news stations broadcasted the disaster, another plane hit the South Tower. Now, it was clear. This was no accident. This was an attack. People were shocked, but even more tragic was what was happening inside the towers. People were trapped. Some had no way out. At 9:37 a.m., a third plane crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The United States was under a terrorist attack. At 10:03 a.m., passengers on another hijacked flight fought back against the hijackers. They stopped the plane from reaching its target, believed to be the White House. It crashed into a field in Pennsylvania instead. Do you remember where you were when September 11th happened? At 9:59 a.m. and 10:28 a.m., the South and North Tower collapsed, respectively. There was a huge cloud of dust. People had to run for their lives. Just like that, the Twin Towers were gone. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives that day. The streets were covered in ash. America was in shock, and the world watched in horror. But in the midst of tragedy, the country came together. Firefighters and police officers rushed in to help. Many gave their lives trying to save others. What would you do if you ever see a burning building? Would you rush in to save the people inside? The U.S. president at the time, George Bush, addressed the nation at 8:30 p.m. from the Oval Office. He reassured Americans that the government was still strong and working to protect them. He promised to find and punish those responsible for the attack. He praised the bravery of first responders and asked for unity and prayer. Why did 9/11 happen? The plan for September 11th started years before that terrible day. A man named Osama bin Laden had a plan to destroy the United States. Osama bin Laden was the head of the terrorist group, Al-Qaeda, based in Afghanistan. Bin Laden hated the United States. He hated the U.S. military presence in the Middle East. He despised U.S. support for Israel and its actions in the Middle East. Bin Laden believed overall he was fighting a holy war against the immorality of the West. He began plotting his revenge against the United States about 5 years earlier. 19 men were handpicked by Al-Qaeda. They spent at least 5 years training for this moment. Every detail was planned. They carefully chose their targets, all symbols of American power: the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and possibly the White House or U.S. Capitol. Most of the hijackers were young men from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon, and the UAE. Al-Qaeda targeted men who were angry at the U.S. and willing to fight for their cause. They trained in camps in Afghanistan, learning how to fly planes, fight, and avoid detection. In 2000, many hijackers moved to the U.S. to take flight lessons and prepare for the mission. In 2001, final plans were set. They traveled across the U.S. buying supplies, scouting airports, and practicing for the attack. On September 10, 2001, the hijackers flew into different airports in the U.S., in Boston, Washington, D.C., and Newark. The morning of September 11, 2001, the hijackers arrived early at the airports. They blended in and went through normal airport security like other passengers. They had box cutters in their belongings, but this was allowed through security at the time. The hijackings happened very quickly. Within 15 to 30 minutes of takeoff, the attackers struck. They attacked the flight attendants and pilots, stormed the cockpit, and took control of the planes. American Airlines Flight 11, led by Mohammed Atta, crashed into the North Tower at the World Trade Center. United Airlines Flight 175, led by Marwan al-Sheihi, crashed into the South Tower. American Airlines Flight 77, led by Hani Hanjour, crashed into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93, led by Ziad Jarrah, targeted U.S. Capitol or White House, but crashed at a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Although there were about 3,000 immediate casualties, the toxic fumes and debris caused long-term health issues. Many people developed respiratory ailments and cancers. Additionally, the horrors of that day led to widespread PTSD for those who witnessed or were affected by the attack. The events of September 11th led to the 2003 Iraq War. The main reason given for the invasion was that Iraq's leader, Saddam Hussein, was believed to have weapons of mass destruction and was a threat to the U.S. and its allies. The U.S. also claimed Iraq had links to terrorist groups like al-Qaeda. But after the invasion, no weapons of mass destruction were found. The war was based on false information and caused years of violence and suffering in Iraq. Many lives were lost, both military and civilian. It's been 23 years, and America is still feeling the effects of September 11th. The tragedy had deep, long-lasting impacts on the country, and many aspects of American life were changed forever. The 9/11 attacks changed the U.S. forever. Security became much stricter. The TSA was created, and airports introduced full-body scans and strict rules. The government expanded spying programs to track threats. Islamophobia increased, and many Muslims faced discrimination. The economy suffered, and the stock market crashed. Osama bin Laden was captured and killed in May 2, 2011, during a U.S. Navy SEAL raid in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Please subscribe for more easy English stories.